Good morning. My name is Scott Redler, Chief Strategic Officer at T3Live.com. Welcome to today's morning call. It is the 7th day of 2016. The first six were definitely not easy on the bulls. Thank goodness we have technicals, and thank goodness, we've seen a lot of the weakness and the damage, being put in place well before that happened. And even if you did see it, it's still not the easiest environment to navigate. Okay, on Friday, you had the jobs number. They sold it. Yesterday, another up open. We talked about perhaps the best setup would be for them to push us below, Friday's low and then reverse up with some kind of, red dog reversal buy program and then, get long for some type of oversold bounce. And that kind of is playing out right now. The question is, how much traction can it get? And at this point, Asia was mixed, where you had the Nikkei playing downside catch up and the Shanghai up small. But what really is going on in Europe, it's broadly higher. Your first potent bounce in the DAX, okay, up 2.5% is helping our futures here, and we're up about 15 handles. So let's go right to the SPX. Now, if you look at the SPX, which has actually held up better than every other sector out there, or most sectors out there, gave you, your first decline right here. This was the last day of the year when you closed below the 200-day. Then you had this slice of your mid-level support here around 1990, which we went over. And then yesterday, we finally put a pivot low in here at what was this mark? This was 1901. So we didn't quite get into the summer double bottom area, but some are actually saying it's your third higher low, even though we're that weak. Low, higher low, higher low. So perhaps it could get us some kind of bounce up. So with yesterday's late day surge, it actually got me long because that was my strategy that if we do put a red dog reversal in here at 1918. Perhaps we get some kind of move back up. The question is what type of move. So, first things first today, can we get above yesterday's high of 1935 and stay above it for more than, 30 to 60 minutes? And if that was the case, I would think, for the first time, resistance 2 could come into play, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, and that comes in a little closer to 1960. Then you have your resistance 3 right around here, and then you have your brick wall a little bit higher. For me, I think, I'm long the spiders and I'm long a few other stocks we'll get into. I'm thinking, if we could get above this, at some point, I'm looking only to stay long into this, hopefully I can even hold it to like the 1950, 1960 area, and then look to maybe short the rally into this. If it sees it, we shall see. If you want to look at the spiders, I went over the chart yesterday and I mapped out some if-then type scenarios, and you did get a red dog reversal in the spiders yesterday. We talked about this pivot many times, even on Twitter. This was your 191.58. Here's your new pivot low. This is your flash crash low, your September low, a little bit of a higher low. So here's that same spot. This spot right here is 193.41. We get above this and stay above this. I'm thinking we could at least see, Friday's high. Friday's high is 195.85, and then this is probably where the easiest part of the rally, if it's going to be easy, and it's not going to be that easy, would be contained. And then I think most people will be coming in and trying to, if we do see this through earnings season, position and get re-short into that spot. Because the narrative, in my opinion, has changed where, it's no longer, you're safe buying a dip. You can only buy a special dip, and people are trying to, reduce their long exposure, as it does feel like this year could be, very strong to the downside. Maybe not in the next month or two, but, could be, in the next quarter or so. Right now you have earnings season, and then in another few weeks you're going to start getting the buybacks, that have been in a blackout period to come in, which could also help support some things, But anyway, at this point, let's see if we can get over yesterday's high, hold above it, and push. And that's probably the same strategy in a lot of things. But right now, that's the spiders. Let's quickly go to the bios that held the 2015 lows. It came in and tested it and held it. So if you were a buyer there, you made a little quick money. And now I guess see if it could hit this 300. And then at some point, maybe people will be looking to re-short it around 314. So 300 would be, an easier portion, not an easy portion, but, this would be some spot that, you could rally back considering we were up as 332 to start the year. So support 1, resistance 1, resistance 2, and then resistance 3 comes in, a little bit higher. The Russell got absolutely obliterated. Well below the summer lows. the double bottom lows, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is, can these beam down sectors just come up and back test? We've seen these things back test a few times. At this point, you have yesterday's high in the Russell at or IWM at 104.78. So if we do get some kind of multi-day move, maybe you get a move up to 107.5-ish, which is old support that turns into resistance, and that's right around here. And just to show you how far we've come down, and again, below every moving average, you do not stay long these things. You love them and leave them if you can, and if you tried even doing that, you got slapped around. So that's that. The Qs have been the strongest sector. They also have not revisited the 2015 lows. Did give you a little bit of a red dog reversal. Again, these weren't that strong yesterday, but gave you at least a little bit of a sign. And now, if the Qs can get above and stay above this 105.06, you have a move maybe to 107, and then a boatload of resistance around the 200-day around 108. So 107 to 108, could happen from here to there if the market wants it. But we'll have to see if that's the case. The reason why the rally wasn't so strong yesterday, I feel like, because oil was just friggin' weak, closing on dead lows. So in order for us to get any kind of power, you're going to have to see some kind of bounce in oil. The XLE, weakest sector out there for the past 2 years. We talk about when sectors are below the 200-day, et cetera, what I just do here. You do not want to be in them or long them or, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, just to show you, look how, long this thing's been below the 200-day pretty much since 92, and now it's all the way down here. So anyway, you stretch out and see, why relative weakness and relative strength matters. This is a good example, because those who have had exposure to here definitely, okay, I can't even attend to this, have not been in good shape. And every time they've had some rallies, they've failed and given you least levels to get out of the way. Look how clear this little head and shoulders top was right there. But anyway, here is your threshold low, okay? Broke below it. Maybe if oil gets a bounce, you could see a move to retest that. But, it's going to be hard to do. Some are saying this is another head and shoulders pattern where this is actually your head now at 70. Your neckline is 57. That's 13 points, which brings you a heck of a lot lower. But as of right now, we'll see if we could hold for the day. The low from yesterday is 54.16. We'll see if that remains intact. It's probably not going to be a focus of mine unless all of a sudden oil rallies. Maybe that ETF will play a little bit of catch up. Yesterday, where I put on some exposure was high beta tech. It's got beaten up and they went green yesterday. You look at Amazon. Amazon did have a nice bounce, on the 100-day, and I was trying to focus on that. Went over the support level in yesterday's morning call. It did do a small little red dog reversal here. Okay, so that got me long. Now the question is, this will probably be the spot where it could get your easy bounce, 630-ish. Why not? Okay, and then, there is still some room above it. Here is your breakout failure. So small pivot here. Can it get above, which I think it's opening above, and stay above, this 620, and then you have maybe 631. For what I do is, when I come in long, like I'm long 4 positions, typically before the morning call, I sell a portion of it, and then I hold a portion of it to see what kind of complexion you have for the day. Does it continue, or do all these things start off green and go red? And if that's the case, I'm usually out when it goes flat, puts in another pivot, then I get back. If they happen to continue to go, I try and trail them. Sometimes I sell them early, sometimes not. We'll see what happens this time. Google looks just like Amazon, had a breakout failure, but a small red dog reversal yesterday. Here is your breakout failure right there, and now you have your red dog reversal. So again, like everything else, maybe this could see a bounce towards 747-ish before some sellers start coming back in. Facebook, very similar. Not a powerful red dog reversal, but from 110 down to the 95 area, why not take a peek here? I did get a little bit long, so above this pivot, I'm thinking, not thinking crazy big time rallies, new highs, but I'm thinking maybe into this spot, 100 to 101, or into this moving average. So that's the type of move that I'm thinking about here. I'm not thinking about momentum craziness, new highs, because that just not in the cards until there's a heck of a lot of more repair going on. But at this point, we'll see, what goes on there. Netflix is actually looks the best. If they want a stock to lead us right here at a high beta land, you do have Netflix very tight. So it had a big volume day last week and gave you a little bit of follow through. Now it's getting tight here. If this were to get above and stay above this 117, maybe you actually got a cleaner move, not just a topping tail through, and it could show you that the market's not that weak. So the problem is market's so weak that they just know that it's going to be hard for any strength to be sustained, but this will give us some clues on the type of day we have. If this can get above this and go back towards 120, I think it'll loosen up some high beta tech type names and keep it on the radar. I did go long this also on what's it called yesterday. So if you're on the VTF, you saw I bought the Spiders, Amazon, Facebook, and what was my last one? Spiders, Amazon, Facebook, and Netflix. Those are the four, besides some leftover options. So we'll see. Unfortunately, I didn't go with Apple. Guys on the desk were talking about the relative strength in Apple the past 2 days, and it's up a decent amount this morning. Question is, again, this broken type name, what kind of oversold bounce could it have? Here's your lower pivot. It's opening above it. It's, first resistance comes now in around this 101, and then really second resistance, which would be probably a spot where guys look to reshort this thing or really give it a harder look, is this 105.50. So resistance 1, resistance 2. Right now it's trying to clear this pivot, and let's see if it can hold 100 for the day. This will be some pretty significant resistance going across here. But it's Apple, so buyback. I don't know if their buyback machine is off or on because earnings are coming out in 2 weeks. You had your sell down here, so if you positioned a little bit into this oversold spot, maybe you get rewarded, and it's also good to help the S&P and whatnot if Apple could skip back above 100, etc. Microsoft has lost momentum, but some guys were taking a look at it yesterday. It also had a little bit of a red dog reversal. I think Sperling bought this, right around here. So now the question is, can it get above this pivot and retest 53-ish? So as you can see, I'm not, there's like the easy spot, and then there's a bigger spot, and then there's the huge resistance spot. So that's, I think, the way you have to go about this. The resistance 1 has been contained for the past 3 sessions. Today it feels like resistance 1, in my opinion, gets taken out, and we get a little bit closer to resistance 2. So if you're just shorting every bounce, just realize how far down we've come. You might want to take a step back before you put out those initial shorts and wait for a little bit higher prices and give things a little bit more room. If you happen to have gotten long yesterday, figure out how much you want to sell and how much you want to trail it, and if you could actually buy something after the first 30 minutes, because that's also been tough. So all in all, not the easiest environment, but oscillators went out at -75, so it made some sense to be at least neutral as far as overly short. And if you want to be neutral to risk on, kind of like you see on the VTF, that's because we've tried it before. Don't get me wrong. Like it's not like we're perfect. And like this is the first time I'm trying to buy here. I've got a little cut up myself in the last week trying to play these red dog reversals that have only been good from the lows and been sold every time after that. But anyway, we'll see what happens today. I think oil is going to be the key if we can get any power. Apple holding 100, I think also would help with sentiment. Spiders getting above yesterday's high and staying above that could give an extra push. High beta tech that went green first, if they could stay strong today, that'll also help fuel it. And then we'll see where we go from there as bank earnings start to come out. And I think that group is so oversold. It doesn't. I have a feeling whatever they say, they might try and get a little bit of a bounce. And if you want to see what the banks look like real quickly, J.P. Morgan absolutely annihilated. Down to 2015 major support levels. So I guess if this wanted to bounce up, you could see something to here and then to here, but I would not get overly excited about the banks. Goldman Sachs has let us lower this entire time. It's got a little pivot here too, so maybe if these things want to get an oversold bounce, they could retest prior threshold lows, and that would take Goldman back towards 170-ish, okay, and then really 175. So not a heck of a lot. This is your lower pivot. First thing it's got to do is get above and stay above this 166.50. And that is that. We'll see what happens today. Follow me on Twitter. Follow the VTF. I'll see you at the recap. Good luck today.